Yeah. All right, Socrates.
Yeah.
This guy.
This guy.
He's very annoying. Maybe, and he says everybody's annoyed with him, and I can see why.
Yeah. You know what's funny is at the end. So we're finishing up our potentially. I hope we'll come back to Plato, but I think Yantushka doesn't want to. But yeah, doing Theatetus today. Yeah. Which is a bit of a doozy.
Although they really like this young man quite a bit.
They do. Yep. And it's kind of interesting because it starts with talking about his death too. He gets
right.
Wounded in battle. But yeah, I was going to say it's interesting because it ends where he's talking about how, okay, well, now I got to go off and discuss this indictment that Melodus is bringing against me. So he's basically on the verge of death at this point,
right.
whether or not he knows it. Which is a good transition into what the whole thing's about, which is knowledge.
Knowledge, yeah.
Knowledge, yeah, that's right.
Yep.
And the conclusion is they don't know what knowledge is. For you, 90 pages, for me, 70 pages. The conclusion is they don't know.
In a
what
way,
knowledge
it's
is.
kind of maddening, and then especially when we post it to Reddit, and then somebody's like, "Oh, well, you have to read book 4 to know." And it's like,
yeah,
"Oh yeah." I kind of believe that when I get to book 4, it's going to get to the end of that, and they're still not going to have a good answer.
Yeah, no. That person was what we would call a sophist. Or sophist.
Well, that's actually the next book I have in the Plato book that I have is the sophist is the next section.
Oh yeah.
After Theatetus.
I do. So they finally do get to words at the end, but
right.
I
didn't get there.
Yeah, it's okay. And it's not in the same way that we would probably want to do it, but I think it gets at a lot of the things that I was hoping to discuss, which is about the mind, because that's really what they. So I guess just to do a brief summary, we already said that they essentially are talking about knowledge and conclude that there is no knowledge, but they kind of have 3 types of definitions of knowledge that Socrates refutes.
Sure.
And it's what this young guy, Theatetus, is bringing up. The first is that knowledge is perception.
Right.
The second is that knowledge is true judgment. And the third is knowledge is true judgment with account. And so that last one is especially difficult to understand, but I feel like the first 2, and again, they sort of go through a lot of dialogues to get at the fact that they don't really know. But the first one I think is maybe the most interesting, and also they spend the most time on it, so we could also kind of do that. And I think it sets the stage for a lot of the philosophers that come, as basically all of Plato does, especially Aristotle and Locke and stuff, who we would term associationists, and kind of discuss how knowledge is built from the sensations and stuff.
Right.
Yeah, because essentially what they get at is before I just rant, any thoughts? I don't mean to just rant at you.
My biggest thought, the biggest thing that I found annoying was the idea that if you're trying to find the meaning of a word or define a word or something like that, this could be a translation issue, I don't know. Yeah. But it's very frustrating to me to say, what is knowledge? And then throughout all of the sort of Socratic questioning, the word know keeps being used.
Yeah. No, he makes reference to that.
I know, I remember he says that, but that really confuses it because we don't, in theory, we don't know what we mean by that word yet.
Right.
And so how can you be using it?
Right. Well, and that's essentially how he refutes because when the last definition of knowledge, which is knowledge is true judgment with an account, an account is really logos, which is just, I guess, there's 3 sort of types of definitions that you can have for it. And in the last one, and actually in the in the definition of knowledge as just true judgment without an account, both of those he refutes it by kind of saying what you're saying, is that you need to have knowledge of something in order to explain it, and thus it becomes a circuitous argument.
Right.
And I think that is actually sort of very, the fact that it keeps cropping up, I think it says something very deep about how we communicate and how we speak, and also signify that we have knowledge, because I think it does get at this idea that everything that we do as conscious beings is kind of bootstrapped in this weird oxymoronic way,
right?
or paradoxical way, perhaps is a better word, because it's like, just as consciousness is this weird thing of reflecting upon yourself to build up this immaculate system or whatever. Immaculate, wow.
Right.
Why would I use such a word? It seems like knowledge is the fact that they kept sort of coming back to arguments that required knowledge to explain knowledge. To me, it feels like that's because knowledge is bootstrapping things. And I think that's why they also kept getting at this complex idea versus sort of elemental idea. And that comes later too, but it sort of is what Aristotle and Locke are talking about, where you have very base perceptions, you have your sensory perceptions, and then you have more complex thoughts that are basically complexing these sensorial perceptions into more complex things, and then its reflection upon those, I think, is what they sort of believe is where knowledge comes into play. And again, you can kind of see how this sets the stage for that sort of thinking, because it's like, so they get into the first knowledge question is that knowledge is perception. That's what Theatetus' first thought is. But really, they sort of ultimately conclude that there's something different between perceiving and reflection. And it's like, and it's in the reflection where knowledge is truly made. And then that's what I was saying. I think Aristotle sort of carries that to a little bit further of a point later.
Sure.
But it's this idea that, the senses are just instruments of our perceptions.
Right.
And they're sort of making a distinction between the brain or the mind and the body. And so they're saying, as perception occurs through instrumentation of the body, so that stands separate from actual knowledge, which is a thing of the mind, and this knowledge is from reflection. Anyway, so that's just some notes I have written.
Right.
But it's
I still don't know what it means.
No, because
I just said it. I don't know what it means. What am I talking about?
Well, and that's why the last, and probably, in my opinion, most difficult definition of knowledge is, because, so the second claim is knowledge is true judgment, and ultimately what they conclude is that we can't know what judgment is without knowledge. So, because they go through all of these examples, and then, sometimes they conclude, you can have a true judgment about something. And they use this paradox about, like, can you not know something that you know, basically? And they go through a bunch of different ways that you can and you can't. But ultimately, they conclude, in my opinion, that they just can't know what a true judgment it is, because that requires knowledge about what knowledge is.
Okay, sure.
And so this is where I think again, we keep butting up against this paradox, which, as I've said before, I feel like once you butt up against paradoxes, that you're getting at some substrate of the system of our mind, though, in my opinion. I don't know what that means, and hopefully we'll figure it out through dialogue. But, yeah. But we can at least know what it doesn't mean. And I think that's kind of also what they conclude, because he keeps making all these references to how he's a midwife, and his mom was a midwife, and I'm sure you love that.
Why would I cut it off? We're on a podcast. Yeah, what are we talking about? Midwife, Socrates.
Yeah.
Midwifery.
Midwifery, exactly. But, they end by saying, like, even though we don't know what knowledge is, we have at least sort of dispelled some
Birthed
of what
some
knowledge
babies.
is in it. Well, they've in some sense aborted some babies.
Right. Well, because he describes, pulling the first idea, the knowledge is perception, as he helped Theatetus give birth. And now they have to send the baby out into the world to go through these trials, and the baby seemed to not do very well.
The baby did not do well. The babies did not do well, sadly.
No.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, and yeah, so the idea that knowledge is perception came from Protagoras' claim that man is the measure of all things. But Socrates refutes Protagoras by showing that, he believes in wise and unwise men, and the unwise men are not measure of things. It's the wise men that are a measure of things.
Right.
So, but with all of these refutations, it's difficult because it's sort of like what you were saying at the last episode. It's like they do make some jumps of logic, and perhaps it's a translation thing,
Right.
But yeah, sometimes it also feels like they set the problem up to be easily refuted.
Yeah.
And
I actually wrote down a step-by-step thing that Socrates did, which I feel like he was either creating a straw man, or he was just talking about something that I don't know what they thought at the time, but it isn't the way that I would interpret what was being said. So this is in relation to the idea of knowledge being perception. So I've written, Socrates tries to claim that if knowledge was perception, then there would not be different experiences because the truth would lie in the object or the thing being perceived. Which makes no sense to me.
Can you say it again?
Okay, Socrates tries to claim that if knowledge was perception, then there would not be a different experience of a thing, like the hotness of the day, the weather. Some people are going to think it's super, super hot. Some people are going to think it's fine. They're going to perceive it differently. Socrates claims there would not actually be a difference in perception because if knowledge is perception, the truth would lie in the thing being perceived. So it would be as hot as it was, and there would not be difference in perception.
I think that's how they came to the idea of reflection as being separate from perception.
Right. Right. Because then my note on that is I think he's placing being on the wrong side of the equation.
Well, yeah, and it's
because to suggest that perception is what did I say? To suggest that knowledge is perception is to say that the knowing end is the perceiver. I know this to be hot, and it does not preclude somebody else from perceiving that same thing as cold.
Right.
And so I think that there's different positions. You could say that it is objectively hot, but that doesn't make any sense to me because to me hot is an analysis. The objectivity is objectively 45 degrees.
Right.
And then the perception or the interpretation of that will vary depending on people. It's like what he was talking about with whiteness, because I think he's right about that, but I don't understand what is or isn't known, because to me, it's like when we try and measure things. A measurement is an attempt at finding some kind of objective something. Because, like a thermometer measures, and it has a number.
Right.
And then hotness or coldness or whiteness or greenness or whatever, those are all just interpretations.
Right.
So it's not known to be hot. It's known to be 90 degrees.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. It's like measurement is trying to set an objective standard, and that's the idea, is that you need a reference to measure it to. And I think that's why they got into this whole conversation about change also.
I I think it was. It's just like it was a way. I don't know. It just feels extremely inelegant and clunky. Mm-hmm. And maybe it was old, and so they didn't have ways of thinking. It seems very easy to me. Not the baseline. What is knowledge from the ground up? But it seems easy to me to set at least something like an objective. And if I were to start talking about knowledge, I wouldn't start talking about hot and cold.
Well, that's one of the interesting. I mean, it's true because it's like when you read this and remembering that it's like over 2,000 years old.
Right.
It's amazing how similar they are to us, but also how different they are.
Right.
And I mean, that's actually one of the reasons I really like reading old things is because it reminds me of that, and in some ways is humbling because it's like they also probably had a much better feel of geometry than us. And I think you can see that in how they tackle the arguments is I just feel like they use inverse a lot more readily than we do. I mean, we use it, and anybody that's sort of equipped in logic or I should say, in like the philosophy of logic, I mean, and math and stuff is going to understand this. But yeah, so I mean, I wonder if they went at that because these are people who are living in a time when it's just, they were experiencing the world in a much different way. They didn't have the same technology we do and everything like that. And I mean, I even made a point when I was talking about the perception stuff because they were making it, I mean, Socrates was making the argument that reflection was separate from perception because the mind is separate from the body. And they didn't make any reference to the brain, which I thought was interesting because, in my sense, it's like the mind is part of the body. Right. And again, this is a whole, obviously some people even disagree with that now, but just knowing what I know as a scientist and an empiricist, I think it's pretty clear that the mind is certainly at least connected to the body as, evidenced by dementia, et cetera. And so I'm saying all this though, just to say that, I think that it is clunky. It is like what you say is definitely right. And it was not succinct. And they have all these, they have a whole part where they go off and he offers some interesting thoughts about the difference between philosophers and lawyers, and that lawyers are slaves essentially, and philosophers are free, but also saying that people hate philosophers because, they ask all of these sort of seemingly pedantic questions. Right. Pedantic.
Well, this is actually my question is, what is the value to all of it?
I think it's at the end where he says it's dispelling sort of false beliefs. And I think that's kind of what the value to our podcast is, too.
Right. It's like, but we don't even know what beliefs or false are. So how can you dispel things that you don't know what they are?
Well, that's a question. Because
we don't know what knowledge is, so we don't know what knowledge is.
Well, yeah, but so this is where it almost feels like knowledge is, though it might be unknowable, paradoxically, it can't be striven for, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like knowledge is the thing that we're constantly striving for when we...
But we have no idea what that even means.
When we think. Yeah, because
so what are we striving for? Who God only knows.
Well, yeah, it's true. The meaning of life is 42, damn it.
Right.
That's the point, though. It's all a process, which is, again, why I think we could talk more about the change stuff, but yeah, no, I was going to say, I think it's the same sort of benefit to what we're doing with this podcast, is it's like we're sort of airing out ideas, and in some ways in a ignorant fashion, right? But we both sort of have this capability of reason, which is just saying like A plus B equals C or not, whatever. And slowly, piecemeal, we're able to like deconstruct arguments and decide whether they were good arguments to hold in the first place. Because, I've certainly already done that with some of mine. If I went back and listened to the first episodes, Yeah, I mean, I come off much more, certainly much more against anarchy than like I am now. And
wait, really?
yeah. And also much more pro, I would say, empiricism than I am now, given the Foucault stuff.
Right.
And, or I guess I should say much less positivistic. I mean, I still am, but like, again, it's like all of these are good at, I think, shaking your confidence, because then it's like, it just feels like as you become too confident, it can lead to sort of a type of despotism, which is, I feel like, what Socrates is kind of getting at without saying it, when he talks about how he's just going around and sort of shaking everybody's tree, and arguing with them to try to show them that, hey, maybe you're not as wise as you think you are.
Right.
And what is wisdom?
Yeah, right, exactly. Oh my God.
Well, what is it, Antushka? You tell me.
Here's the thing. I start reading it, and like I get 10 pages in, and it's like, I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't care what knowledge is. That's where I come off with it. It ends up frustrating me, because I'm sympathetic to the point of we need to be self-questioning, self-examining, right?
Right.
The unexamined life is not worth living, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. I get it, and I'm with him on that. But I think that there's wisdom in not beating a dead horse. And I feel like there's something about elegance, I guess, if I think about computer programming or math. You shouldn't overprove something. You only need to do a proof to the point where it actually happens.
Well, that's interesting, because, I mean, actually getting back to Gödel, it's like he was essentially proving somebody, by the way, just to correct it, it was basically these mathematicians tried to put out an axiomatic system for all of math.
Right.
And that was what Gödel was addressing. Mm-hmm. And so they thought that they did it.
Right.
And Gödel came in after the fact
didn't do it.
And said that they didn't do it.
Right.
And I mean, so that's where, I mean, I would disagree.
Okay, a line of code shouldn't be one character longer than it needs to be. I'm not saying that you can ever find the perfect thing, but there's no reason to add extra characters for me.
Right. So it's just a question of, how do you know that you have the most efficient?
I don't think you do.
Yeah.
But I don't think here's where you can know if you're adding extra stuff. If I write a little hello world, like print a hello world thing, and I just add some stuff at the end for no reason that doesn't even function, that makes no sense.
Mm-hmm.
If I add, a line of 4 P's that it doesn't even read through.
Right.
That's what I'm saying. So don't make it longer than it needs to be. And
so
it's true. Yeah. We can probably constantly refine and cut down and increase efficiency. But to me, there are not many situations where you actively want to decrease efficiency. Not that you never do.
Yeah, but I guess because you're essentially saying this is what Socrates is doing. He's adding more code than he needs to.
Well, I guess it's Plato is doing it in this case.
Well, yeah, Plato. But yeah. But I guess I would say to that, it is not giving credit to sort of, I guess you could say, how new this type of dialogue was.
I think that's a very fair point. Yeah.
And that's also the idea is, like, when anybody's programming, you just sort of try to get it to work, and then you make it more efficient.
Right.
But you just try to get something that functions, and then you cut it down. And you could say we've been cutting these ideas down for the last 2,000 plus years. And yeah, I mean, but we had to start somewhere, and somebody had to get the thoughts on the page. And that's why I was saying also there's definitely, while it is, again, very long and sort of just confusing, quite frankly, he puts out a lot of ideas that are picked up by just tons of people.
Yeah.
And again, the perception one maybe being the most, at least the best example in my head, because this is what Aristotle really, I think, runs with and kind of lays the foundation for empiricism.
Right.
Because, I mean, this is the idea that you can't know anything without experience.
Right.
And then that you're building knowledge off of your sensations, which
Right.
is your experience.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I mean, that has definitely been maybe potentially the thing that has accelerated our development for better or worse in the last 500 years.
I mean, I imagine that most people have an intrinsic sense of that because we all experience the world through our senses. Like, I can't even imagine what it would mean to know anything if we had no senses.
Well, yeah, because
That doesn't.
the world.
I can't even compute what that is.
Yeah, because the world is our
Like, if we
senses.
can't see, hear, feel, like, what? How are we going to know anything?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's why, even though they sort of concluded that knowledge isn't perception, knowledge is definitely something having to do with reflection, which is one
Reflection
conclusion, I
on
think.
perception.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. With perception being the ground. And I mean, I think Socrates even agrees that, and he sort of even puts forth the blank slate idea in this
Right.
when he's talking about how, like we begin with nothing.
Right. Right.
And of course, that can be refuted now that we know about epigenetics and stuff like that. And,
we know about epigenetics.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
we're aware of it, right? But yeah,
Right.
I mean, yeah. And I think that's why they kept sort of, again, I wonder if part of the paradox comes from this paradox of moments that we were getting at, like way back in the Foucault, whatever that was. Was that the 7-point ones or maybe the 6-point
I don't know.
episodes? I think Nietzsche might have been 6.
5 maybe.
Maybe it was 5, yeah, because
Yeah.
Nietzsche was the 6.
Yep.
6.0 episodes. Yeah, and we got, I mean, this is something I would like to come back to at some point, but it's I think this is like a central thing that all philosophers are trying to deal with, is like, how is each moment linked? Mm-hmm. Because that's ultimately what you sort of get at when you break down causality
Right.
to
right.
the bare bones, is how do we even know one moment is linked to the next? Mm-hmm. And thus, how do we have any memory at all? Because that was another thing of knowledge is also, it seems to be associated with memory in some type. And so this is where then I would come in and say, well, then that makes me realize that knowledge is associated with consciousness. Of course.
I was going to try and beat you to that one, but yeah.
Yeah, you can't beat me to it.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? Well, why?
I mean,
so
I
you were
think
thinking
it's
that
related.
too?
I think that where these conversations, another frustration I have is not that I don't think all of these ideas are related. There's kind of like a washing machine of things happening. So consciousness is a thing, and out of consciousness springs things like anxiety and maybe knowledge and
depression
and depression and planning and all sorts of crazy things. Mm-hmm. But I would not say that these things are all equal to each other. Mm-hmm. Like, if I wouldn't make an equation that consciousness equals planning, that consciousness is a precursor to, like, you're not going to plan unless you're conscious.
Right.
And so the same... Well, what would you be planning for?
I think you're right, but it's this idea that,
sorry.
Yes, I think you're right. I think I accept that, but for some reason it made me wonder, because I was starting to think about how, planning obviously has to do. You need memory to plan, right? But you don't. But memory, I think, precedes consciousness.
Okay. It's
just a question of whether you need to be aware that you're to plan. I guess that's the question. Do you need to be self-aware in order to plan?
Well, planning feels like a self-aware activity to me. So if a squirrel is just going on instinct, that they know they have to like bury nuts in the ground.
Well, that's exactly it.
They're not thinking about it. Then no, I would
Right.
say that's not a conscious act. To me, a planning is a conscious act because you're aware that something might be different in the future, and you're trying to. You are consciously trying to prepare for that situation.
Right. Yeah. So what would you call just an automaton that has the instinct to, say, store food for the winter?
What would I call them? A squirrel?
What would you call that? What would you call that? Action.
What would I call that? Action? Some kind of instinctual. I wouldn't call it action, actually. I would call it instinctual behavior, maybe. Mm-hmm. Action's a special word to me.
Well, yeah, because that also has to do with consciousness in your head, right? Yeah.
Right. I mean, I think that here's the thing. I actually don't think it matters what a word means at all. I think that it's just a sound coming out of your mouth, and we can assign meaning as is useful. Mm-hmm. So it's very useful for us to have general agreement.
Right.
And so we both speak English, and like English is an awesome tool because we can communicate pretty well. Mm-hmm. And so if I say, for me, judgment means apple, that is a crazy thing to do, and it's very unhelpful. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't really matter what judgment means. Well, it does if
you want to communicate your ideas.
Yes, exactly. And then if what you end up doing is you say, what does judgment mean? No idea. What does knowledge mean? No idea. You start stripping all of your, important words of meaning, you're going to not be able to communicate any more.
Right. And yeah, so
I think that there can be utility in having provisional meanings that are not completely bulletproof. Because I think that it's rare to have a meaning that's truly bulletproof. I think an equation is close.
Right.
That's to me about as close as you can get. An arithmetic equation is almost bulletproof.
Right. So I got into this is making me think about one of the Reddit things I got into with somebody, and it wasn't actually antagonistic.
Oh, nice. I haven't checked points recently. Have you got some good ones?
I was just responding to some of the ones that they had responded to you.
Right. But I feel bad this week. I started I feel like I got a lot of good stuff going, and then I wasn't able to interact as much.
Yeah, people were really giving thoughtful responses.
Yeah, it was a good week.
Yeah, this one person was it was in reference to sort of this idea of communicating words, because they were talking about like politics and stuff, and how a lot of what's wrong with politics is people are kind of moving the goalpost with what they mean by words.
Right.
And it just got me thinking about whether we actually, and basically saying if we just used the agreed upon, if we all agreed upon a meaning, but it's the question of whether we all ever do agree
I don't think
on
it's
the meaning
possible.
of a word. Yeah, and also how would we know, too?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
How would I know if you have the same...
Right. Because the way that we verify this is by trying to articulate it into words, which we've already sort of agreed is an inexact method. Mm-hmm. Because I guess I think about words as, similar to what you're saying, but they all have an amorphous...
Right, you can't do an equation.
Barrier. Yeah, right. It's like they have a barrier that goes out to infinity in some sense.
Right, because 2 + 2 = 4 is a literal statement that those things are identical. Mm-hmm. That there's literally no difference between the two.
Right.
However, saying that judgment means perception is not so literal.
Or knowledge means perception.
Sorry, knowledge means perception.
But if knowledge is true judgment, then true judgment would mean perception.
Right, but here's the thing. But if you say judgment, you're going to give a different definition. Like it's not going to end up being so nice and circular like math.
Right.
Like, it's not going to be the same as 2 plus 2 equals 4 equals 3 plus 1 equals
Right. But that's
10
why,
minus 6, right?
I mean, that's why in any like scientific and I would say mathematical paper, you start by laying down your definition so that people can understand.
Yep. So this is what I got into a little bit. I was trying to get into it a little bit on Reddit, and I didn't have enough time. And I actually got into it in a separate discussion that had nothing to do with the podcast about fascism. But I think it's the exact same thing. So this is what I was saying. I don't care what a word means. I care what you mean.
Right.
What are you trying to say?
Right.
And that can be hard to articulate also. But it's way more important to me what it is you are getting at. And this is part of where Socrates is really annoying to me, because his whole, like, I know nothing, I'm not saying anything, is like, well, then what value? Like, go away.
Yeah, but again, I think
you're trying to get stuff out of other people, because that's the other thing. Is it's not that he's just sitting there drinking a coffee, not talking to anybody. He's trying to elicit stuff out of other. He wants other people to lay their ideas on the line, present liability in the situation, and he wants none.
Well, no, because to be fair, it's just we've read some where they don't conclude like sufficiently. But
no, I just mean throughout he keeps saying, I don't have any beliefs. I don't think anything.
Right. Right. But in doing that, I think he's getting ideas out of people. And I think also and again, this is where we maybe need to look at Socrates as whether or not he was a real person and whether he was just a method that Plato used to bring up interesting ideas. You know what I mean? If maybe that's a good argument for how Socrates was just a tool devised by Plato to elicit all of these ideas that many people, because that's the thing, is we know that Plato had ideas because we have ideas like, the Platonic ideal and stuff like that, it's like as these ideal substances that come out of this work. So ideas have been put forth in this writing, whether and this is again probably why a lot of the credit isn't just for Socrates. This is called Theatetus, right? It's not called Socrates discussion of knowledge, right? It's so
because Theatetus is the one putting his ideas on the line.
What's that?
Theatetus is the one putting his ideas on the line. It's this whole thing is you can. Part of the Socrates trick is you can do it anytime, all the time.
Right, but that's why I'm saying is like he begins to be looked at as a tool to get ideas out of people. And
if he's just a tool, why did they kill him?
Why did they kill him?
Why did Plato kill him off?
Because you should know this. People hate tool. Tools. Yeah. Why do we have to be sober, Antushka?
Oh, yeah. No, it's why can't we not be sober?
Yeah, right. Sorry.
Yeah, you should be. What the heck?
I am, yeah. All the Tool listeners are now done with this podcast.
Yeah, they were with us so far.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I do like that song, though.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm not sure I know the song, but I at least like it. What's knowledge to you, Mr. Man?
I don't know. Something I would, true belief is probably what I would have said before this reading. And with the caveat that is nearly impossible to judge.
Yeah.
So, you can think you know something, or you can have actually landed on the correct answer. And it's very hard to know which you have done.
Right, because that's essentially how they got into teasing out reflection from perception.
I don't think it's an easy problem, but true knowledge. I know it is 95 degrees outside. Maybe that's incorrect, and I think it can be correct within a certain domain, and incorrect in sort of the complete universal. Because 95 degrees is a measure that we've invented. So that it's a whole thing is, yes, you can be in C major, and that can be true, but C major is also an invention. C major doesn't exist according to trees.
Right.
That's just a construction we've made.
Right.
It's a triangle. That's another construction we've made. So you can be correct. You have true belief that it is, in fact, a triangle because you've defined the parameters of the whole system.
Right. Right. And I guess this comes back to potentially the idea that, would it be that, everything is subjective?
Like a solipsism or something? Brain in a vat kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean,
I don't think everything is subjective. I think that we are subject. We can only be subjective in our thinking. The root of our thinking is subjective. And so the idea
that sounds like Protagoras' claim that man is the measure of all things.
Yeah, I think it's related. And so maybe I'm just not getting Socrates.
Well,
but maybe I'm stuck 3 steps behind or something. But.
Well, I think the main sort of refutation of that was just the idea that it's clear that unwise people aren't the measure of some things.
Right, but how do we measure who's wise and who's not?
Right. Well, in the case of, as they were bringing up, like shipbuilding and whatnot, or like, somebody who knows how to run a ship, it's like people are going to look at, that's a very concrete example where it's like you either know how to navigate a ship or you don't. And so the unwise people aren't the measure of what a good navigation is.
Well, hang on a second, though. I think that the ship was the justice one, right? What was the ship one? What was that?
No, there was a ship one in this too.
Oh, he went back to the ships. Okay, I didn't get to the ships.
That's okay.
Okay, I don't even agree with any of that. I think the problem is we're jumping levels too much. So if we're at baseline level, what is knowledge? And we're trying to say that knowledge either does stem from human perception or it doesn't. The navigating a ship properly is just a made up idea. Because who's to say what? This is where it's like, who's to say what a wise man and a not wise man is?
Right. Well,
how are we judging any of this?
Yeah.
Well, so we could say results.
Are you getting to the place that you want to get to, for instance?
Right. Are you getting to the place that you want to get to? Sure.
I mean, there's plenty of ways that you could examine that. And so then this is true, is then, well, maybe the unwise man is taking his or her parameters to be not getting there.
Right. Well, because it seems to me that, Socrates, the wisest man in the history of everybody, isn't getting anywhere. He doesn't want anything.
Well, he's wise because he's not wise. Because he knows he's not wise.
Exactly. But so everybody else is trying to get somewhere and failing, and he's the only one not failing because he's not getting anywhere.
Right. He's very zen in a sense.
Right.
Because I mean, honestly, it almost makes me feel like it's this idea of, again, once you get too confident with stuff, you have a propensity towards, screwing up a lot of stuff. And maybe this is also, again, looking at Socrates' life, he lived in a time, I think, of experts and everything like that, And again, at the sort of height of Athenian democracy and everything like that, Athens was a very civilized place and thus a very specialized place.
Yeah.
And it just makes me think that's not also the reason that he exists to question everybody is to humble everybody a little bit. And there's good in that. But anyway, getting back to your point about knowledge, though, I think I agree, though, with the idea that this is why I think a lot of the examples are not great and sort of make a lot of logical leaps and make it kind of difficult to read because of that. With the knowledge that we have about the brain, we can go deeper. And that's where it's like, it does seem like knowledge, it like I said, it involves memory and it involves complexes too. And I think it was interesting that they were hitting on that
What's a complex?
It's just more than one thing.
Okay.
And
like more than one data point or something like that?
Yeah, so it's more than one. So this is maybe how this, again, getting back at the idea that the perception, or you could say the sensorial input itself isn't knowledge, but knowledge comes out of intertwining those sensorial inputs to make higher order thoughts. And
that makes sense to me.
And then as you sort of start to combine those, you get knowledge. But knowledge is maybe really difficult to pin down for the same reason that consciousness is difficult to pin down, because it's this highly convoluted network of neurons that are
does knowledge have to be
associating.
correct to you to be knowledge? Does it have to be true?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think
Because like I can say I know my mom went to the store yesterday, and I could be totally wrong about it.
Mm-hmm.
Could that be something? Like, is that statement sensical if it's not true?
See, I think that this is where maybe we use knowledge, and it's like when I'm talking about knowledge,
right?
I don't know if truth necessarily comes into play or has to come into play. It's almost like knowledge is just creation of higher order thoughts.
So for you, what's the distinction between knowledge and belief, if any?
Well, so they refute it as, saying that knowledge isn't true belief because people can be sort of convinced to believe falsehoods, as in the case of lawyers.
I didn't mean true belief. I mean belief generally.
Yeah.
Because belief can be false.
Right. It feels like belief is a less concrete form of knowledge.
But you think knowledge could still be false?
I don't know if true and false need to come into play. It's almost like it just is, if that makes sense.
Maybe.
Because I think that's also where they one of the reasons they had such an issue defining it is trying to bring in these other amorphous terms like judgment.
Well, yeah. So to me, they're kind of knowledge and belief are related ideas.
Yeah. Yeah,
and
knowledge, it's like it's just knowledge is the thing. And I think this is also telling. They talk about kind of possessing knowledge versus having knowledge. Kind of like you can have birds, but you don't have them with you all the time, but you still possess them. But once you have them, then it's like a closer...
it's like property.
Maybe.
And so you could sell it, but that's illegal.
Yeah. Well, But I guess it's...
for them, not for us. We do it all the time.
Right. Did they say selling property is illegal?
Yeah. No, selling knowledge.
Oh. When did they say that? I missed that.
In the trial. That was one of the things they accused him of.
It wasn't selling knowledge. It was that he was teaching and thus
being paid for it. Because being paid to teach was illegal.
I don't
That's
think
what
that
sophistry is, right?
It's being paid to teach if you're not accredited, I feel like was what they were saying.
Okay.
But I don't know.
I was under the impression that it was illegal to teach for pay.
Oh, maybe. I might have missed that. So I actually don't know.
I mean, it's not the craziest idea in the world. That it would be illegal to teach for pay.
Yeah.
I mean, there are people who argue that all information should be free and labor should cost money.
Right. Well, but getting back at what you were saying is it's like knowledge is just something that you carry from each moment to moment. And in that sense, again, it's related to memory. I think memory And probably the reason is because of this imprinting effect that senses have. We are able to remember past sensations, and in so doing, we can then combine them with other sensations to make thoughts, to higher order thoughts, and then we can start to build knowledge from these more complex thoughts.
I'm having a hard time understanding what you mean when you say knowledge.
Yeah, well, that's because it's almost like the network of all of these interactions is maybe what knowledge is. And that's why it doesn't necessarily need to be true or false.
So, like, if a religious person says, I know that Jesus is God, that could be true.
In the network that
because
they
that's
have.
a pretty high-order thought.
Well, but, so imagine a neural network has a certain knowledge imbued in the weights of the network, which are just numbers, but it's like, when you put an input into a certain neural network that's got a certain number of weights, you're going to get an output very specific to that network.
Right.
And it's almost like that's what our knowledge is. It's this weighted structure of interconnected neurons.
I think it's above me. I don't get it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm not saying that I'm making any sense. I'm just trying to follow.
I don't know that you're not.
Train.
I just don't understand.
Well, I'm probably not, but it's like knowledge is the association of our neurons. It's the interconnectivity of our neurons is maybe what the knowledge is. It's the network. It's the network structure of the neurons.
Yep. I think I'm sticking to it's pretty close to true belief. And I don't think that's a bulletproof. I don't think that works in every sense of any interpretation of the words. But I just don't see that it has any utility.
What? Knowledge or
yeah, I think that the word
is?
stops having any usefulness unless it means something. And as we said, it can mean anything. To me, knowledge is related to something being correct.
Right.
Knowing is different than believing. Belief can be correct or incorrect, and it's just it's a distinction that I make, and some people make, and some people don't make. But like, if somebody says, "I know Jesus is God," they are making that distinction. They're saying that that's even stronger than belief. That they are positive.
Right. Well, and that's why I was saying, I feel like belief is a weaker form of knowledge.
Right, but to me it matters whether it's true or not. And so knowing whether something
but what is true,
fulfills the category of knowledge is very difficult to do.
But the problem is when you add the word true, that's a very amorphous word in and of itself.
Like in accordance with the universe.
Yeah, but what does that mean?
That means it is objective.
But this is where I think again why they got into the question of change, because it's almost like the way that you measure things is by putting up against a reference. But if your reference is ever changing, then it becomes very hard to measure.
So there is no way to gain true knowledge. According to my version of knowledge, like only God has knowledge.
Yeah. Yeah, well.
Like you can't know. Only God can know, so to speak. You can believe with varying degrees of confidence.
So what's the difference between true knowledge and true belief, or are they the same then?
They're the same. I'm putting those as equal.
Well, but if knowledge is true belief, then true knowledge would be true squared belief. I don't know.
True knowledge is a nonsense idea, I think. I think knowledge is by definition true.
Yeah. Knowledge is by definition true.
I don't think that has to be the definition of the word either. That is how I would use it.
Well, I think I'll go by the network structure then, and we can reflect on this. Okay.
Yeah. I'm trying. What I don't get with the network structure is, I guess I don't understand like the higher orders and lower orders. Is that just like more nodes or something like that?
It's more interconnect. Yes, exactly. It's just consider what is the most simple thought. And in the brain, it's just a one neuron being connected to, the sensory input in a sense.
So
right?
like
So
10 firings is belief and 20 is knowledge.
yeah, well,
I just made up numbers, of course.
oh, but it's the system. It's that whole system. Yeah. So it's more than one neuron. It's the connectivity of all the neurons together.
So like
that
one
creates the
neuron is
knowledge.
thought, 10 is belief, and 20 is knowledge.
Maybe.
No,
Belief
I mean, maybe I'm wrong. I'm asking. Yeah.
No. Belief feels like it is a lower order form. So yeah, maybe a smaller amount of the network. But I mean, belief is tricky. I haven't thought as much about belief as I have knowledge. So I'll have to, I don't want to give a definitive answer of that. And again, this isn't even a definitive answer about knowledge. I'm going to be sort of slippery like Socrates. But yeah, just from what I know about neuroanatomy, it's like you've got an afferent neuron. You've got afferent neurons, but they're sort of in sequence that run up to your sensory cortex. And so there's a neuron in the sensory cortex that's sort of taking in, sort of at least connected to at least one afferent neuron. But that's where it becomes.
What does afferent mean?
Means that it's going into the system, whereas efferent is going out. So efferent would be connected to your motor, your muscles, and afferent would be connected to your senses, whether it's your optical sense, your hearing, your touch, sensation, temperature. And the body is very much organized in this sense. You have something called the central sulcus, which is just one of the main sort of ridges or canyons in your brain. And basically things in front, towards the front are going to be involved in the efferent part. This is where your motor cortex is. And then things in the back are more involved with the afferent part. But then there's a bunch of neurons that run between them that are sort of called the association cortex. So anyway, and there's connections that are running between these places and everything, and it gets very complicated. But the point is that it's not so easy to say like 10 neurons and 20 neurons, because each afferent neuron that's sitting in the somatosensory cortex in the parietal lobe is going to be potentially connected to many.
Well, I didn't mean those numbers literally.
No, I know, but I'm just telling you why it's hard for me to answer that, and why it's tricky, because each neuron is going to be connected to many other neurons, which is why this is such a very complicated, and I think is why it's hard for us to pin down these ideas.
What does a higher order thought mean?
An higher order thought would just be you take in one sensory perception with another sensory perception and you combine them. And then you might combine that combined thought with a lower order and potentially even a higher order. I mean, it gets very complicated because of that.
But so belief would be just seeing, and then knowledge would be seeing and tasting.
Potentially.
Or something like that.
Yeah, no, I mean, but I think that's kind of...
Is that a better way of putting it?
I think so, because it might be you start to think about knowledge on a spectrum.
Like triangulating.
Yeah, and we kind of talked about this with Foucault, where I was trying to get at, like, truth feels like it's a probability of, like, corresponding a bunch of different things together. And yeah, I mean, as you triangulate or coordinate multiple things, if you want to think about knowledge as a spectrum with the most concrete knowledge on one end and no knowledge on another, belief does probably reside somewhere like in the middle or something, Right. Yeah, I like that. This is why I like the podcast, Antushka.
Yeah, I mean, I like it. I can at least understand what you're saying.
No, that's good.
It makes sense to me. I don't really have a refutation. It makes sense to me. It still is. I mean, talk about subjective.
Yeah. Well, and again, I mean, the interesting thing is
just all within you.
Right. No, for sure. And that I think is because it's like we can never really say what other people think, right? It's always going to be from our perspective. We're sort of constantly battling with that problem.
Right.
But
so my claim of I know that my mom went to the store yesterday. If you saw somebody who you believed was your mom, and you heard them and you believed it was your mom, and you smelled them and it smelled like your mom's perfume or something like that, that could be a statement of knowledge, even if you come to find later that you were mistaken.
Well, it's interesting because they bring that up of like, if you see, like, I think Theatetus was like, what if I see somebody from far away that I believe is you, but then turns out it's not Socrates, you know? And I think that's sort of in the same realm where it's like, I think that was used as an example of how you can know things that you don't know.
Right.
But that was a very confusing
I mean, that's
part.
kind of a bad example on what it was. That Theatetus, or was that
It was Theatetus, yeah.
Theatetus, yeah. I think it's a bad example on his part, because I think if you see somebody from far away, it's very likely that you're mistaken.
Yeah.
And so if you elevate that to the status of knowledge, I think you've made an error.
Right. But then it gets to the question of, like, we're all changing in each moment. So, you know, who is your mom even the same person from one moment to the other? Anyway. Maybe it wasn't your mom.
You show up and your mom's now like John Goodman or something?
Maybe.
Like, whoa.
Yeah. Well, we can put Socrates aside for a bit.
Yeah.
Hopefully you didn't hate it too much, Antushka.
I liked this one more than the last one.
Really?
I did.
Interesting.
This one was my favorite of the three.
Really? How come?
I just found it easier to understand.
Really? That's interesting.
I found the defense relatively easy. That last week, it's just like, it annoyed me so much.
Yeah, because I actually felt like this was the hardest, but maybe
I think it was hard. When I say easiest to understand, I mean that I could read a sentence and be like, okay, I see where he's going. And I tried to do that with the Republic, and I ended up stopping because I couldn't follow his logic that much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we didn't talk about the three definitions of account, but I think you would hate that because, I mean, it's like they have three definitions of what account means: vocalizing versus
account?
enumerating. Like account being
ACCOUNT.
Well, so I think it's actually logos. But it's, account, ACCOUNT was the word
Does
used
that one have
in
two
my...
C's? That's one that always gets me.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's like, it's basically being able to account for what something is in whatever way it is. So you can do that vocalizing. Anybody can sort of say what something is. But, you know, he refutes this by saying that anyone can do this, so that doesn't necessarily mean they have true belief. Or you can take the definition that account is enumerating something and being able to break it into its substituent parts.
Right.
But then they use this sort of wagon definition saying, you know, like, even if you know what a wagon is, it doesn't necessarily mean you know all the parts that go into a wagon. I don't know. So this is where I should probably just stop talking because, like, I was confused by this part. So I think
what you just said makes sense.
Yeah, but then anyway, and then knowing... Also, there's another account of knowing the difference between things. But the reason that this isn't true is because it uses circular logic.
And
to
they keep
explain
saying
it.
knowing, I bet.
Well, that's the point, is in knowing the difference, it uses circular logic because we need knowledge of what the difference is.
Right.
So, but that last part was just very... I thought that was like the hardest thing I feel like I've had to read in this. Foucault was difficult, but this just... I read like 3 or 4 different people's summaries of it, and none of the people's summaries made sense to me either.
Right. Nice. I think,
yes.
It's probably a translation because account is a weird word to focus on in English like that.
Well, yeah. So other definitions other accounts I saw were using the word logos. Yeah. See what I did there? See what I did there?
I have no idea what you did.
Me neither. I have no knowledge.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Cool. All right. Let's get off of that.
All right. So I had to pick something for next week, and you said something on property rights.
Yeah.
So I actually thought reading John Locke's treatises on government.
I like that. Nice.
It's another dude.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
I don't know.
Yeah, we'll read Hildegard. Maybe we could read Hildegard next.
Like next?
This.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I have a book here that has his 2 treatises on government, and then a letter concerning toleration. But we could do the 2 treatises and then maybe something else by him.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if we wanted to pick up on this, he talks about all this in his whatever it's called, a theory of understanding.
Right.
I can't remember the word.
Right.
I read part of it.
The other thought I had was Adam Smith.
Yeah, Wealth of Nations is difficult too.
Yes.
Very small print. But yeah, I'd be down for that.
I mean, they're kind of long though. I don't know
if
because the one that I have here, the first treatise is about 93 pages, and the next treatise is 111 pages.
Those are pretty
the
long.
second treatise is the one where he really gets into property, but I don't know. I figure we can do 1 and 2, and then maybe a third reading by him from something else.
Okay.
What do you think?
Yeah, it's just this is going to be a tough. That's a lot to read. But
I mean, I'm definitely not going to be able to get through all of it. There's no way. I have like 2 more 3-hour sets to learn this week. So
sure, yeah. Okay, yeah, we can try it.
All right.
So okay, we'll start with the first. These are good. I mean, these are important doctrines.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there's too much important stuff. This is the other thing. There's just so much stuff out there.
Yep.
Yeah. And then, what do you think about Reddit and everything? There was that little battle with the guy. Hey, we should talk about that. So he didn't like that I was promoting our show in how I was bringing it up.
Right.
And I'm of 2 minds about it because he's right, and I can understand not wanting a community where people are doing self-promotion, I guess, sort of. I mean, I kind of get it. And I think there's this problem where if you are trying to do something that you want to become popular, you're going to have to promote it. Mm-hmm. And so basically my thought on it is if I don't get kicked out, I'm going to keep doing it because I don't really have any reason to post there otherwise.
Yeah, no, and
and if I get kicked out, I don't care.
Right, and it's working. Like people are listening.
Exactly.
Based on, I mean, we have very defined increases in our listenership.
I also
when you do
am
this.
honestly trying to spark a conversation.
Yes, no, and that's what I was going to say is, I mean, yeah, so the person was like saying something like, there are ads on Reddit that you can use, and it's like, okay, yeah, but also, everything public in a sense is promotion, and that was my pedantic point to them was.
You should have tried to Socrates him. Start asking.
I was.
Oh,
I mean, they were, and so that's why I was like, you should listen to the podcast because you're very Socratic.
Yeah.
Because he was like, because they didn't actually respond to that idea that by them even just commenting on the post, they're self-promoting their account. And all of their beliefs.
That's good. I like that.
Well, it's true. It's like anytime you have a public discourse, you're promoting yourself. It's like if you really didn't feel like you should promote, then you should just not say anything to anybody.
Right. Because most interactions online you don't engage in at all.
Yes. And I would say that's the vast majority of mine,
Right. I mean, everybody. Nobody can interact with even close to the majority. So any interaction you're having online is a choice you've made.
Yes. And then that's the thing is then there's, because everything's a promotion, then there are sort of etiquettes to promotion, which I think then I agree with what you're saying, obviously, because, but yeah, you are promoting with genuine intent to spark a discussion. And also, you're always starting with the question and putting what you believe, and then you post it, later. So you even have to kind of open the thread if you want to find the links to get to the episodes.
Yep.
So, yeah. And to your last point, it's like they would just ban you if they didn't like it. The moderators would ban you.
Philosophy.
Like philosophy did. Exactly. So, and that's fine. They're within their rights, and they're just afraid that we're going to just poke their bubble.
The funny thing is the first time I got pulled down, it was for not asking they didn't consider it a real question.
Right.
Which was weird to me.
Yeah. No, yeah. So So yeah, I thought that was funny. But this is the thing: is this person was obviously just a jaded Redditor. I mean, it's like every time this happens, I'll go and I'll look at the dialogues that they've had.
Yeah,
and it's always just very, And I mean, again, I'm not saying that you're not allowed to do this, but of course, it's just they didn't seem to be trying to interact from a good place.
I don't think so.
It was all contentious.
I feel like I run into a problem sometimes where I start to feel bad because a lot of the responses I think are kind of dumb, and it would just take a lot of writing to respond properly to it, and so sometimes I just don't. Yeah. And it isn't even that I don't appreciate the engagement; it's just like it's kind of like missing the mark, and I don't know. But then I feel like an asshole.
To be honest, I even feel like when I respond to people, I take a long time to respond because I'll reread mine and I'll be like, am I really addressing what they were saying?
Right.
And often I am not. And then I reread and rewrite.
I mean, sometimes I do that on purpose to not get dragged around because I think it's easy. It happens really easily on Reddit is you get dragged around in a side point and a side point and a side point. Right. And then you're not arguing about the thing anymore. You're arguing about something completely different.
No, but that's the thing is maybe you stay on track, but I feel like I was getting off into my own side points is kind of my point.
I see. You're sidetracking yourself.
Exactly. But and I was going to say, like with this person that was, it's like
this person.
I was just whatever they might be. Like one of their responses on another thread was somebody was asking about like mental health. What do you do to be happy? And they're like, nothing. I just am. So it's just like And of course, this was downvoted because it's like they're allowed to say that, but it's like.
It's pretty stupid.
Yes, exactly. So, there's just a lot of people like that on Reddit. But it is funny because, it's just, if you ever wanted to do a really the people that run Reddit they obviously probably do their own studies on all the data that they have, but it's just an amazing amount of data on the human psyche.
Well, so I asked my younger brother what he thinks of Reddit and social media platforms because he's enough younger than me that he engages in social media pretty differently than how I do. And he said that Reddit is for people who think that they're smart but are only moderately intelligent. That
I don't know.
That feels pretty right.
I don't know if I agree with that though, because one of the people I feel like when I learned about Reddit. I'd known about Reddit for 10 years, but the first person I ran into that was really heavily using it, like back in 2015, is now a surgeon. Nice. So he's like a pretty smart person,
right?
And so
maybe I agree. I think that and there's also people who engage in Reddit in all sorts of like hobby things, like knitting Reddit. Are these people done? Like what they're doing is a little bit different on Reddit.
Right. And I guess and honestly, whenever we do post or whenever you post and I read the responses, there's often just interesting angles and good distillations. Of course, you have to weed through a lot of BS, but yeah. I feel like I always do end up having a better knowledge about whatever it was we were talking about from seeing some of the people's responses. Right. Like somebody had a really good distillation of the Republic.
In the Plato one, right?
Yeah.
Those good responses there, of course. You'd expect it, yeah.
We appreciate that if you're listening.
Yeah, there's probably a lot of people in that one that know Plato a lot better than I do, and maybe you do. But.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
No doubt.
And it's nice of the anarcho-capitalists to not get mad that it's not really on topic.
Right. Yeah, no, I can't remember how your upvotes were for that this time.
I don't know, I haven't looked. It wasn't amazing. The Plato ones generally have not. I don't know what it was. Those Rose Wilder Lane ones got people so mad, but I got so much karma for them. I don't know what it was.
Yeah. No, Well, certainly they were on topic for like the anarcho-capitalist.
Yeah, I guess it was more. They were more related to the groups we were in.
And I mean, you probably have good karma in that group now, and
I see.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, the philosophy pages, I just cannot get any
No, yeah.
Dude, philosophy people are weird. I don't know how many philosophy majors you've talked with, but
yes. No, I mean, he wasn't a good friend, but yeah, back in undergrad. A
nice.
friend. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. I don't. Yeah. I mean, I don't want to.
Yeah,
I don't want to say names. Yeah. But yeah, no. I mean, but yeah, he was. I mean, they're smart people, and they obviously understand this stuff better than us. And I think there's always going to be this guardianship of like, with anybody, if you spend your whole life doing something, and then just some random people come in and start trying to talk about it, there's always going to be pushback. And we're basically wading into everybody's territory.
Right. But that's good. People should wade into our territory. It's this thing. It's like, I don't think you need a degree in music to talk about music. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's true of most. I think that there are areas where having expertise is required. Mm-hmm. I mean, like, I can't really talk about electrical engineering because I don't know anything about it.
Right.
So if somebody was asking me how to make circuits and stuff, like, I don't really know.
Right.
And like, I don't know how to set up an electrical grid.
Right.
So I have nothing to say on it at all because I just have no clue. And so that I understand that that's required. But things like human interaction and words and philosophy, this is things that actually I think everybody engages with to an extent.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Politics, history.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to the point that, we have the rational sense, and so we're able to follow logical arguments to the best of our ability.
Yes.
No, I agree. And I mean, it's like, everybody talks about medicine now, so it's like, come on.
Yeah.
And science,
Science.
And it honestly makes it better that people wade into that because it keeps everybody on their toes.
Yeah.
Which is good.
Although I'm not sure how much that's happening now, but yeah.
Oh, it's definitely happening.
Is it?
I think so.
Because to me, all of these areas, these legacy areas, it's not just science and it's not just medicine. Legacy institutions, like people who talk about history or people who are in media, reporters and stuff like that. Complaining that there's widespread mistrust, I think basically can only be a good thing because you have now a chance to explain yourself where nobody was listening before. Now you can say, no, we're definitely right because of this. And if you're not willing to do that, to me, that's highly suspicious.
Yes, and you can't say evidence-based medicine if you can't explain what the evidence is to somebody.
Sure.
You need to be able to explain your case.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's not just medicine. Like, I'm not picking on medicine here.
No. I mean, I'm bringing it up for the obvious reasons.
Right.
Of what
what
may or may not be my background.
Yeah, it's definitely not. I'm the doctor here.
Yeah. The doctor.
The doctor. Yeah. All right. So John Locke, not Adam Smith.
John Locke. And I was just going to say, just an interesting thing. For some reason, I've noticed that our like a few of our episodes, like the hippies weren't lazy episode, is just randomly people are listening to that one. I don't know why.
Oh, again?
Yeah. Like when I look at the analytics, it's like that and like Anarchy and the Antushka.
I mean, that's pretty good.
Yeah, that's a good. Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't understand your title last week.
Oh, yeah. I could have probably. I probably could have came up with a better one because I feel like people probably read it as incel.
I thought it was something related to that.
No, unicel, because we were talking about like justice for is subjective. That was one thing that came. And it's like, what's the most subjective thing is the unicellular organism.
Okay.
Yeah.
I did not get that.
Yeah, I know.
I thought it was some type of like a unicell. They only have sex with one person or something.
No, unicell meaning one cell.
Yeah.
Unicellular organism.
Right. Nothing to do with celibate.
Yeah. Nope. Yeah, but it's also kind of funny. That's why I kept it, because it's like I figured everybody, including you, apparently would be confused by it. I'll try to come up with a better title this time, though. I don't know if you have any ideas, but yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, if you have any, just let me know.
I don't know. I do have a song that's related to this knowing business. So.
Oh yeah, what do you mean?
I have a song about how it's impossible to know.
Like you wrote a song?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. So you want to shout it out?
It was called We Don't Know. Yeah. But nobody knows who I am, right?
So beep.
Yeah,
right. That's right.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yep. All right.
Just go find the Reddit profile. You'll figure it out.
Oh, yeah. I have all the information there.
Yeah. Cool.
Yep. All right.
Sounds good. See ya.